Welcome to Beyond the Veil. Today we hear from Amber Cavanaugh, who shares her profound experience following a stroke in 2021. She recounts the choices made during her near-death experience, emphasizing the significance of connections beyond the physical realm and embracing her purpose to positively impact others. Her journey underscores the transformative power of adversity and the constant support from the spiritual realm.
My name is Amber Cavanaugh. Before my NDE, I could see and talk to dead people. I'm also a psychic, a medical intuitive, an author, an empath, a healer, and an animal communicator. I used to be a social worker. My education is in social work. I think my story is a little different than some because I already was aware of the other side and what I felt sort of awaited me in the lessons I would learn. But I still had some surprises when I crossed over. I think I should kind of start with the NDE and the stroke. It was 2021. It was Christmas, and my kids and I and my husband and then a couple other previous foster kids had come over, and we had done, what is it called? Gingerbread house making for the day. And it was nighttime and we were going to watch a Christmas movie. And I all of a sudden got a super bad headache. And I didn't fully comprehend that it was any worse than other headaches I had had. I think headaches are super normal, but it was so bad that I decided to go to bed and leave my family watching the movie. And I went to bed, and about an hour later, I texted my husband and said, I can't sleep. Can you bring me some Tylenol and Advil? And he did. And what I thought fell asleep, but apparently I went into unconsciousness because there's a debate whether my carotid was dissected, because at the first hospital it was, but then 2 days later it was already healing. But they say that headache was my carotid dissecting. And I fell asleep and didn't wake up for 4 or 5 hours. And in that time, I had a massive stroke. That stroke went all the way through my artery and caused a secondary stroke of my frontal lobe. So I am missing essentially almost half of my brain on this side of my head. And so I woke up in the morning not being able to move. I was paralyzed on my right side. I didn't know that. I thought I was dreaming. And I was nonverbal. I could say 2 words. Long story short, a whole bunch of stuff happened. My husband called 911. He knew I was having a stroke. He did all the tests that you're supposed to do. And the ambulance disagreed. The paramedics disagreed. They thought I was drunk or something. I don't know. It didn't really matter because the damage was already done. So I got to the hospital and they gave me the medication that is supposed to reverse the signs of stroke. It's called TPA, and it did not work. I also had a wonderful allergic reaction to the Benadryl they give you with the TPA. Because it didn't work, they needed to life flight me to a bigger hospital to offer brain surgery, because otherwise there was no other sort of options to treat the stroke. They figured the stroke happened too long ago, so the TPA cannot work. So they called the helicopter, and all of my family was woken up at 5 a.m. to come and say goodbye, because the doctor said, she's not going to make it probably to the next hospital, but we will try, because, I was 40 and I have teenage kids. And so my husband got to go on the plane with me, because the doctor thought I was going to die in the 15-minute plane ride. Usually you don't get a family member with you, but they let my husband. And I got on the helicopter. I was sort of laying there looking around. I was awake and conscious, and the sun was coming in the window. And my husband thought it was bothering me, and I started to get really hot. We found out after that rise in temperature is something that happens when you are very close to death. And so he tried to block the sun from my eyes, and I was protesting, because the second that sun really hit my face, I closed my eyes. I was in the helicopter. The sun was hitting my face. I could see my husband. There were 2 other people, I don't know what they are, the medics that go with you. And I closed my eyes. And when I opened them, it was like that quick. I was on the other side. I don't know how to explain it other than everything just made sense. I was in like an amazingly beautiful garden. The grass was like nothing you've ever felt in your life. I could feel everything around me through the grass. The energy just flowed. Everything sort of glimmered with the light of God or source or that higher energy. And I was standing there and I could see people, I could see some of my animals. There was like a little sort of body of water pond thing to my right. On the like further up to my right, there was a huge group of people, and they were from all walks of life, all different time dimensions, past, present, and future. And I knew, I didn't walk up to them, I didn't talk to them, but I just knew they were all my other lives. And I had already believed in sort of simultaneous lives, but that really confirmed it. And even though they were all genders, cultures, races, I could recognize like a little bit of my soul in each of them. To my left, there was some of my loved ones who have crossed, but also my husband and my kids were there. And I think for me, in order to make the choice that I was going to be faced with, I needed to know that no matter what, I would be with my kids. Because if the choice was to leave your kids, I would have chosen to come back. Full stop. It wouldn't even have been a question. And so my kids and my husband were there. And then in front of me, there was kind of like a gazebo type thing and a bench. And a little river flowed from the pond underground and then under the gazebo. And it went kind of down to the left. And so I was sort of looking at all of this. It felt like it was 50 years or 100 years. I know it wasn't. I wasn't out of my body that long. And I walked up because at the gazebo, there were my guides, two of them. Their names are Gail and Jessica. And I already knew them because, again, I'd been working as a psychic medium, since 2015. And this was in 2021. So I knew them, I recognized them, and I knew that they were going to be the ones to sort of walk me through this process. I could see my loved ones, and it's different on the other side. You don't have to say physical words. I don't think I said one word the entire time, like verbal or like out loud word the entire time I was there. It was more telepathic. So I knew without having to talk to them that my loved ones were supporting me. I knew what my animals were thinking. There was a couple of them there. One I lost when I was younger, one that was still alive. I didn't know at the time she was going to actually pass away like 5 days after the stroke. And so I walked up to my guides and we had an entire nonverbal conversation of why I was there and what I needed to do, the choices I needed to make, and how I was going to be able to do that. And even though I say we had this conversation, it's like you just know the second you cross over, at least for me, there was no why. Like, why did this happen? Why didn't I know? How am I psychic? And I didn't know I was going to have a massive stroke. How am I going to go back into that body that is obviously failing and do anything? None of that was a question I needed to ask because I knew without a doubt, whatever choice I made, there was no judgment. There was no wrong way of doing things. It was just a choice. And each decision or each outcome was perfectly planned in its imperfection. And so my guides helped me understand that if I chose to stay on the other side, there was nothing wrong with that. And that would be the end of that life and those lessons. They showed me what would happen with my kids and my husband and, just everyone I knew. I didn't necessarily focus on outside sort of family. It was more my concern was my kids and my husband. And then they showed me, what their lives would be and what would unfold and the lessons that they would learn. And the fact that I could see my kids standing right to the side, agreeing, they were like, yes, of course, like we are going to be okay if you choose to stay here. And then they showed me what would happen if I chose to go back. And everything sounds wonderful when you're on the other side. So when they said, and they were very firm, they said, if you choose to go back, the next 18 months will be the hardest time of your entire life. And I have not had an easy life. I was born being able to see dead people. I lived a life where I always thought people could see that and knew there was something wrong with me. And so, they really stressed it was going to be the hardest time I have ever lived. They said I would learn a lifetime's worth of patience in 18 months. And then they added like a little caveat that yes, the next 18 months would be really hard, but the next 6 months would almost break me. And I would want so bad to come back, and I would regret my choice, and I would feel horrible. And let me tell you, I did. I felt like I was such a burden to my family. And so we talked about all of that. We talked about every facet of coming back. They told me, like, even though those 18 months were going to be really hard, I would eventually write books. I would speak to thousands of people about my story. I would be able to provide hope to people, teach people, and essentially make a huge difference to the collective consciousness. That sounds amazing when you're on the other side. When you come back into a human body that is totally, totally destroyed, it doesn't sound so amazing, and it doesn't sound possible. And I really doubted my experience for the first couple of months because, the world would say that I was hallucinating because my brain was dying. And I was frustrated. I was angry in a body that didn't work for me anymore. But, when you're over there, it's like, wow, of course, like that's so wonderful. They told me that I would have deficits for the rest of my life. And I do. I have aphasia, which means I struggle with speech, especially when I'm tired. And I can't feel the right side of my body. I have no sensory. I can move it, but it's not the same. I don't have strength, and I can't feel pain, hot, cold, anything like that. And because I don't have control of my right side of my body, my tendons and muscles and stuff can't keep my joints in place. So I live with chronic pain now, and those deficits will be there forever. At least, I think. I know healing can happen, and I have gotten a lot better, but, it's nothing to scoff at living with a brain injury and those deficits. And so, I got to be there for, it felt like a long time. I spent a lot of time. Yes, I had to make a decision, but again, the grass felt like heavenly under my feet, and I could feel all of the people around me through the grass. And then I would walk over to the little creek and I would put my feet in the water, and even the water emanated God's love, or that highest energy's love. And so it was kind of distracting, and it was wonderful. The entire time, I could see my family still here. I could see everyone panicking and bargaining with God, even if they weren't religious, saying things like, if you just let her live, I will do this, that, and the other. Just please let her be okay. I saw and felt the panic, but I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't like sad that they were having to go through that. I knew that they chose this too. They planned this life too. And so it was easy to get distracted, but I was there to make that decision. And I did go sort of back and forth somewhat, but I knew that the sort of promise of affecting change was so much more important than staying there and just being able to sort of relax and not having to fight what I was going to have to fight. And so I went to talk to my guides again telepathically and said, I made my decision and I want to go back. I need to go back. And the second I made the decision, like literally just as quick as I was out of the helicopter on the other side, the second I made that decision, I was out of the garden because you can't stay there once you've made the choice. I didn't go back into my body yet, but I was in this like light-filled waiting room, I guess you'd call it. And I couldn't see the garden anymore. I couldn't see my guides or any of my loved ones, but I could see everyone here, including my body. So I watched my body land, and I didn't clinically die. My body was clinging to life the entire time I was on the other side. And so I was like above my body, if you will, kind of like you hear about people that have surgery and stuff like that, and all of a sudden they're floating above their body. And I think it's a way of helping us to survive something that's unsurvivable. Our physical body can go through it, but our soul can have a break. And so I watched myself land and be brought into the hospital. And then I had a grand mal seizure due to the brain swelling. And when I was on the other side, my guide said, if I chose to die, I was going to have this seizure. I was going to continue to have seizures as my brain swelled until it was no longer survivable. Essentially, I would be brain dead and my family would have to pull the plug, which not fun for them. And so I watched myself have the seizure. And as soon as the seizure was done, as soon as my body in a way sort of stabilized, I closed my eyes and I was back in my body. And that was it. I couldn't see the other side anymore. I wasn't conscious. My husband said after the seizure, I fell into like a super deep sleep. And I apparently had a couple more like focal seizures, smaller seizures, before they put me on medication for seizures. So I then was unconscious, I think. So the stroke happened on the 23rd, the night of the 22nd. And I was in the ICU and unconscious, I think, till Christmas. I don't have a lot of memory of the first few days. My body and my brain were very damaged. I did finally wake up, come back into consciousness on Christmas Day that I remember. I could have like fluttered my eyes a few times before that. And I came back into a body that was much worse than I thought it would be. So I was paralyzed on the right side of my body. I didn't even have a shadow of movement. I could not move anything. I was completely nonverbal. I could say 2 words, my sister's name and the F word, because swearing is on the other side of my brain. The stroke was on the left side of my brain, so my affected side is the right, but swearing is on the right side of your brain, so I could swear. And that started sort of an extremely difficult road. I was on a high from the NDE for the first kind of 3-ish days, maybe 4 days. And I just wanted to talk about it all the time, but I couldn't talk. I also, when I could kind of say things about it, I would repeat myself because I didn't know I was repeating myself. But on actual Christmas Day, my husband and my kids were in the room. They were letting more people, because I was in the neuro ICU. They let them in all together because it was Christmas and I'm a young person and they felt so bad. And so they came in the room and the neurologist came in the room and said, like, how's she doing? Is she talking? And they said, no. And he said, you should try to sing with her because the right side of the brain holds your ability to sing. Speech is on the left. And apparently I sang 2 songs, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman, when I couldn't talk. And so I think that gave my family some hope that I could hopefully get better, even though I couldn't do anything. And then miraculously, even the doctors say it was a miracle that all of a sudden I just started getting better. Before, like, I woke up, they had done an MRI and I was completely blind in my right eye. And I woke up and I could see. They took my license anyways because I had a seizure. And I think they didn't believe that I could see. But within a couple of days, I could stand. I started talking and walking. And I'm not going to say it was easy because it wasn't, but I had this wonderful gift of the knowledge from the other side that I had so much potential to improve. And the things they had showed me on the other side, yes, I knew I wouldn't get a lot of feeling. And they told me my right hand would never work and I wouldn't ever be able to shake people's hand or anything like that. But other than that, like the sky was the limit. And so I rapidly started to improve. My mental health didn't, though. Once the high of the NDE was gone, I was miserable and I felt like such a burden. And I felt like I'd hallucinated all of it. And I just was very hopeless. And the seizure medications, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. It was horrible. It made me feel absolutely awful. And they couldn't figure out why the stroke happened. And so I was being poked and prodded and tested for absolutely everything. We still don't know why it happened, but I felt like a burden and I just didn't understand how I can go from paralyzed, nonverbal, and miserable to doing all the things that they had said I would do. And so, yes, the first 6 months, I don't even know how many times, probably at least a dozen times, I would pray at night to have another stroke so that my family didn't have to suffer and watch me. I had zero control over my emotions. I would laugh when I wanted to cry, cry when I wanted to laugh. Everything was overwhelming and everything was horrible. Even with rehab, I did 10 weeks of outpatient rehab. And in that first 6 months, I think I had 2 or 3 mini strokes, which is normal when you have a massive stroke. My dog, who I call my soul dog, died. My other dog died when I was still in the hospital. We all got COVID. As soon as that 6 months was done, things started just rapidly happening. All of the things they had said would happen started happening. And it was almost unbelievable. And it still was very difficult. And I'm not going to say it was wonderful all the time, but everything they said was going to unfold did. We now say the stroke was a gift because it brought us so much closer together. My kids call it character development, and it has become just part of my life. Yes, I was gifted before, but when I woke up, it was times a million. So before I had such good boundaries and, I didn't let spirit bother me when I wasn't working. And I couldn't necessarily read humans' thoughts, but I could feel their feelings. And when I woke up, I all of a sudden could read their thoughts. And so people kept coming into my hospital room and saying, I thought they were saying, oh, this is so awful. I can't even believe you have young kids and it's Christmas and you're all by yourself here. And, they thought I was going to die still. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, why are they coming in here saying like, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for you. And so I started talking, like trying to tell my husband this. And I very quickly realized they weren't saying it. They were thinking it. And so I started having to set boundaries with my husband and my kids. If you're having a really hard time or something I'm doing is really upsetting you, you guys got to talk together or talk to me, but you can't sit and brood around me because it's extremely stressful for me. Thankfully, I was able to sort of learn to control that so I didn't have to hear what everyone was thinking. But man, oh man, there's a lot of pity when you've gone through something like that when you are young and just in any age, but also when you have kids. So my gifts are so much more. And I think as sort of everything I don't want to say predicted because they didn't predict it. They just showed it to me, started coming to fruition. I started realizing that 100% this was my purpose all along. Everything in my life that was so difficult and such a challenge now made sense. I have so much more understanding of why we are the way we are and how we exist. And I just have empathy for everyone who struggles or who questions, why we're here and what the point is. I spent, 40 years, well, 35 till I accepted my gifts, feeling like there was nobody else like me on the planet and feeling so alone. And I now know always that there is never a time in a human's life where they're alone. Sounds a little creepy sometimes, but I mean it in a good way. We are always supported. We have a literal cheering squad on the other side that is there for us, full stop, no matter what. And there is a plan. There's this whole new sort of societal thing of, are you living your purpose? Find your purpose. You won't be happy unless you're living. Our purpose is to be here, to learn. That's it. And if you are breathing, you are learning. There's nothing you have to do to make yourself better or more palatable to sort of earn a place in this world. We are here, we are existing, we chose to come into this life, and that is amazing. And I think sometimes we kind of need to put society's views of us and our existence to the side, because when we're struggling, we're learning the most. And I know that that is opposite of what most people say, but I learned more in that first 18 months than I did my entire previous 40 years. And, I had learned a lot. And I'm just now so grateful that I can let people know that even when you're completely alone in this world where we are more connected than we've ever been, and yet we're more isolated than we've ever been, because our connection is not physical. It's through screens. It's through, as I'm doing an interview, through social media. You're never alone. You're always, always surrounded by your guides, your loved ones, your other souls, your other lives. And I think it's hard to remember that sometimes. And, coming from me who, really didn't remember that for that first 6 months. And I was so angry at my higher self and my soul and my guides and God for putting me in this position. And, but I learned more then than I am even now. And I'm just so grateful. I think, if I could leave one thing with the people who are watching, it's that just talk to them. Even if you can't see them, even if you can't feel them, and you don't necessarily have a lot of faith that you are supported outside of this physical world, just talk and let them know that you're there and that you're listening and that you're open to their presence being around you, because you are never alone.